Morning. Woo. Hello. If you're joining us online, please feel free to get involved in the chat, and it's always good to be together. Hey, I don't know if you had one of these things. When I was younger, I had this thing called a mood ring. You might remember them. And they were pretty trendy, and they came out in the late 70s. They were pretty trendy in the 80s, so it gives you context for my age there. But what happened was you had this mood ring, and I don't know if you had one, you know what I'm talking about. Like, it would change colors, remember? And in theory, it was like you could wear it, and it would be the predictor of what you were feeling, what you were going through, you know. And we always thought it was quite funny to like see as it changed colors, you know, it changed from reds and yellows and blues. It was supposed to tell if you were angry or upset. It also was supposed to show if you were in love, which is always funny when that happened, when you're a bunch of kids and you're like, oh, you're in love, who do you love? Oh, yeah, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so sitting in a tree, K-I-S-S-I-N-G, right? That sort of thing. And the way they work, I don't know if you know this, the way they work, it's a fake stone. It's a chemical, you know, it's a man-made stone. And the chemicals that they used to make this thing are designed to react to temperature. So when the temperature changes, the colors, you know, the chemicals react, and the reaction of the chemicals make it change colors. So that's the way it really works. So it does change colors, but it does it changed on your temperature, you know, which is kind of linked to your mood, because we know that our temperature fluctuates sometimes with our mood. But it was all a bit of, well, it was fun and games. I don't know if you had one. It was quite a lot of, fun and games, you know. But emotions aren't always fun and games. Sometimes emotions are incredibly powerful and incredibly strong. We can have like really low moments and really high moments, and that can happen in the same day. You know that's true. If it hasn't happened to you, you've seen it happen to somebody else. It happens to our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues, our children, our parents, our family members. You know, it happens, doesn't it? You know, we've all seen this happen. And sometimes these aren't fun and games, because fear can be so strong that it prevents you from doing anything. Fear can be so powerful that it actually holds you back. You don't take a step, you don't take a risk. You know, your envy or your jealousy can be so consuming that it colors relationships and it colors friendships, and you think you miss the moment because I don't have what I want and I'll never get it, and it can just, it steals the moment. You know, we know this, that passion and rage can shift so far that it becomes destructive in our words. We say things that we shouldn't have said and we didn't really mean, or we do things that we should never have done, and we break people with our rage. People and things are hurt. Emotions can be so powerful, we can feel so low that life itself becomes something that we don't even want to experience anymore. Emotions are incredibly powerful. And maybe you've experienced some of these things. Maybe you grew up in a home where you weren't allowed to express emotions. Maybe they were repressed for whatever reason, or looked down on, or you're just too emotional, you're too that, or stop being that way. I don't know your upbringing, and your emotions can also be affected through trauma, so you might have experienced things that affect the way we respond. And you know, I don't want to rush past and just assume that we've all had the same experiences, because we haven't, because we're all humans, right? Or you might have lived in a household where, you know, emotions were actually full Technicolor, full on. I mean, it was like, it was there all the time. Maybe it was so volatile that maybe you didn't know what to expect when you got home from school. Maybe it was so volatile you didn't know when you'd come home what your partner was going to be like. Maybe you just didn't know what was going to be like, because it was so full on. You didn't know what you're going to experience. We all have experiences, haven't we? And I was thinking if we're going to illustrate, sometimes emotions also do this. It's like they take the steering wheel to our lives. And somehow it begins to force us. It seems to all of a sudden take over and determine where we go and what we do. Oh, don't. I won't try that. I won't try this. Or I can't believe they did that. And and nobody loves me. I can't carry on. What happens is it's almost like emotions take over our lives. They take over. They take control. And we've probably all, if we haven't experienced it, we've seen it happen. And should emotions really control our lives? Or should we control our emotions? Makes me think. It makes me ask some questions. I wonder if emotions should color our life or control our life. And that's really what we're going to be looking at. For the next few weeks, we're just going to dig into this whole idea of emotions and see what the Bible has to say about it, see if there's some helpful advice that we can find through Scripture. And it got me thinking, like why do we even have emotions? Why? Maybe, I don't know, maybe your brain doesn't work this way. So you then think, well, why do we have them in the first place? Why were we ever given them? And that's where I go. And I think, well, if God made us, why would he make us with emotions? If we're so prone and so susceptible to emotions sort of taking over our lives. I think, you just think if the dial for vengeance and revenge could just be turned down a little bit in the human psyche, I think the roads would be safer places. Don't you? I think we'd have a lot less countries fighting against one another. If the dial for jealousy, just think if we could turn down jealousy a little bit, your friendship circles in school or at work would probably work a lot better. Instead of competing against each other in the office place, it would be like they want to see you succeed. If we could turn down the dial on sadness so it doesn't become so heavy and debilitating. I mean, just think about it. If you were God, if you were the creator, don't you think there'd be a few things that you should tweak? Make a little bit of adjustments. If you're driving in a car and the music's too loud, you kind of turn it down. Or in my case, it's never too loud, so you always got to turn it up. And then someone else in my house turns it down, and well, they just turned it off. Let's just say that. But anyway, you make adjustments. And you think, well, why didn't God make adjustments? Why not? And this affects all of us. You could be young and old, you could be single, you could marry, divorced, widowed. It doesn't matter. You're human. You could be a follower of Jesus or not even a follower of Jesus. What we're talking about relate. You can understand what we're talking about because you're human. Well, okay, 99% of us are human. You can figure out which one is the alien spy. But anyway, so we're human. We're all human. And humans have emotions. It's got something more, something deeper. And I'm convinced that you can't help having emotions, but we can help each other with our emotions. I'm totally convinced of that. And that's really our heart for this next series where we're going to be, digging into. And I want to just take a moment. I'm not a scientist. I'm probably the furthest thing from a scientist, to be honest. But there's a lot of people who've done a lot of research into how it works. And you can go into it and look into it yourself. It's an incredible field. And it's studied by lots of things, human biology, sociology, business management. A lot of emotion is studied by a lot of different types of fields. There's lots of research out there. But not everyone's really clear or the reason why we have emotions. And I want to propose a possibility, a theory, and look at one idea about why we would have emotions. And for me, I think we have emotions as a human species because we're like our creator. We're like the designer. The one who created us with emotions. And so for me, that's my approach. And it might not be your approach, and that's okay. I understand that. But if you give me the space to just say this is how I perceive it, and to try to explain a little bit why. And if we were to define emotions, a very simple definition is this, that they're feelings that are in response to like your circumstances or situations. It's a response to something or someone. Now, when we look at why we have emotions, I think ultimately it's because we're made in the image of God. And step back in time with me for a minute. There's this story, and you might not believe the account in the Bible. I get that. You might write it off as something that's just fanciful or mythical or whatever. But I'll just say this as an introduction. The Bible doesn't pretend to be, nor ever say it is a science book. It's not a science textbook. And when we look at this story, let's remember that first and foremost, it's a story about God, telling us what God is like. It's the story of how God tried to rescue that which was lost. So read it more like a story. Don't read it like a science book. I'm not trying to read this like a science text. I'm looking at this as the story, this account, which more than anything is trying to tell us what God is actually like. And then when you get the Bible, and the Bible is a book, but it's a lot of books. It's 66 books that have been put together. And we know we've talked about this a number of times. And so it's not just one book, it's like a library of books. And then the first book of the Bible, the first thing, the first line, the first thing that's said in the first book of this library, in the book called Genesis, it says this, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's the first opening sentence of the story. It was a dark and stormy night, right? This is the opening line to the story. In the beginning, God created. The first thing it tells us is God creates. God's a creator. God's an artist. God's involved. And then it begins to describe a number of scenarios. And what happens is God speaks and things happen. It's like his words themselves are like pregnant, potent, life-giving words. It's like stars, flowers, animals, trees. And it's more than just calling something. It's like saying something to somebody. You know, when somebody says something to you and they say, I believe in you. You're wonderful. You're amazing. You got this. You can do it. It's like they're, even in our own human natural language, there's something about words that can be potent and powerful and pregnant because they give us life. And God's words were the same. It's like he's creating things, and we read this account and he's speaking and things are happening. And he says, this is amazing. And then he does something else. He begins to have another creative idea, and he says, let us make mankind in our image. Let's make mankind. And it says God created male and female in his image. And the only thing we know about God at this point in the story is he's an artist. The only thing we know is he's a creator. The only thing we know is you don't know what else is going on. All we know about him at this point is he creates. He's involved. He cares. He's doing something. He's making something. That's all we know. First and foremost. Maybe the first thing you think of when you think of God is like, oh, this angry old guy that sits on top of a hill waiting for me to mess up so he can zap me with a lightning bolt. I don't know what the first thing is, but the first thing that we're given as a description of God is this artist who is involved, who creates, who speaks things. And the way he speaks, he brings things to life. He's the creator, creative. And he's so creative, he wants to make humanity like him. Now remember, this isn't a science textbook. This is an illustration. This is something to show you what the heart of God is like. And he creates humanity. And then the crazy thing is, the next thing we begin to discover about humanity is they're put in this garden. And do you know what they're told to do in the garden? To care, to be involved, to make, to create, to tend, to work. They don't just have to let it sit there and just be, overgrown with flowers and vines or whatever they had back then. They're involved and they're creative as well. Did they make a clearing? Did they plant different things? Did they say, hey, those two colors, those two flowers look amazing together? In fact, God trusts them to get on with the job. He just says, go for it. And then the crazy thing as well, not only do they do that, which is like their creator, they then name things. All of a sudden you have Adam naming the animals. The story says, and you call the things what they are. Let us make humanity in our image. And then the first thing we see is humanity behaving in the same way, creating, cultivating, caring, speaking, naming, calling things to life, calling things what they are. They don't make them, we're not able to make it from nothing, but we get involved. And see, the first bit of the story is humanity like the Creator. And I just think it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and you don't have to get many more pages further on in the story to discover that actually, and you know this already, we all screw it up, right? I mean, humans mess things up pretty easily. Just turn on the news this evening. You'll see it. We mess things up all around the world, globally, politically, personally, individually. We're really good at it, aren't we? I mean, humanity's really good at just screwing things up. So you don't have to go far in the book to realize, humanity's been doing it for a long time, a really long time. They make a big mess of things. And emotions take over, and people, a couple pages later, one brother decides to kill his other brother because he's jealous and angry. It doesn't take long to see that emotions run havoc and take control over someone's behavior, over somebody's thinking, and it hurts people. It doesn't take us long to read that in the story. And years later, God sends his own son to step into the creation, to step in that which was made, and he sends his own son. And you kind of think, well, if you're going to send your own son, you're probably going to send like an upgraded model, right? I mean, we've seen all the sort of films, haven't we, where robots and stuff like that, and there's always like an upgraded model, and oh wow, I thought that person was a human the whole time. Oh wow, no, they're actually a robot. Oh, we've all seen those sort of films, and you'd think it's going to be like an upgraded model, and then Jesus comes to earth, and he's still got loads of emotions. Still has loads of emotions. He's described as having compassion. He's described as having compassion so much that it makes his stomach hurt. That's what it means when it says Jesus was moved with compassion. The words there, the language there in the Greek, it means to like your guts turn. It's not just feeling sorry for somebody. Moved with compassion to the point where it actually hurts you because of what they're experiencing. Jesus moved with compassion. It says he was frustrated. It talks about him being worn out. It talks about him being tired. It talks about him needing a break. It talks about him being angry. It talks about him being annoyed at times. It talks about him feeling sadness. Not just sadness like I'm feeling sorry for something. And 2 times there's an experience where Jesus feels sadness to the point that it moves him to tears. One at the death of a friend, and one he's coming towards Jerusalem and he begins to weep and he says, my heart was to pull you close to me, and yet you rejected me. Twice he's moved with tears in that way. On the cross, he's moved to anguish, feeling forsaken and left alone. Before he gets ready to die on the cross, he's just torn up. So much so that his tears are like blood. He experienced emotions. The dial didn't get turned down for Jesus. Jesus felt emotion. An incredible amount of varying emotions. And I think that's kind of just something interesting, don't you? Don't you? We're getting near to Christmas, and the God with us is the God that experiences life with us, so much so that he feels our sorrows, feels our pains, and has experienced them himself, our joys and our sorrows. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, it tells us, there's this passage later on in the Bible, this guy named Paul writes this, and Paul used to be somebody who hated Jesus, but then Paul later on became a follower of Jesus. And Paul writes this in his book of Colossians, which is a group of people that lived in Colossae, And he writes this, and it says this. He says, Jesus is the very likeness of God. The likeness of God. And Jesus said this about himself. He said at one point, he said, when you see me, you see my Father. When you're looking at me, you don't just see me. If you see me, you've actually seen my dad as well. I was at a rugby game yesterday, and one of the coaches said to me, "Oh, your mini-me has been helping out with the basketball." He also talking about my eldest son, who's been helping out with the basketball team at his school and helping coach with some of the coaches there. And you think, you see, when people say that, don't they? Oh, that your child looks like you. And Jesus is saying, when you see me, you see my dad. I'm like my dad, We were made in God's image. And Jesus had emotions. So I guess the thing we have to recognize is that emotions in and of themselves are a divine gift. They're a divine gift. It's how we are made. The ability to feel and experience things is intentional. It's on purpose. It's divine. It's not accidental. It's not a mess up in your wiring. It's on purpose. You're made this way. Made this way. And I'm sorry if you've ever felt like it was an accident. It's not an accident. It then gets me thinking, maybe then our emotions reveal something more about God than they do sometimes about us. Because if they represent the one who made us, right? Maybe, And when an artist goes to work, you can always tell the creator behind the artist, behind the work. If you've ever looked at a Van Gogh is significantly different than a Dali. The artist has done it differently. They might have even used the same colors, but it's different. And you can see the artwork, but you know who the creator is behind the artwork because of the creation. And I wonder, maybe that's a bit more like us, because when our emotions color our lives, our emotions make us who we are. It says this in Ephesians, the same guy, Paul, who we talked about a moment ago. Paul also wrote this, and he said that you are God's workmanship. You are God's workmanship. The cool thing about that is the word that he uses there in the original language is where we get the word for poetry and poem. The Greek word there is you are God's poema. You are the poem. Yeah. You are God's poem. You are God's piece of poetry. You are God's artwork. You are God's handiwork. Not an absent-minded, snap my fingers, something happened. You are God's handiwork. Have you ever tried to write a poem in school? You think about it. You wonder, is this the best word? What word should I use? You're involved. You are God's handiwork. You are God's poem. He's involved. Isn't that kind of cool? You're not an accidental mistake. The way you are wired is the way you are wired because you look like your father. I can tell that piece of artwork was painted by Da Vinci because it looks like Da Vinci's work. You can tell who the artist is. That one is clearly a Rembrandt. That one's obviously Matisse. I can tell who did the paintings. Wow, that's a sculpture by Tracy Emin. I can tell because it looks like the artist. You are God's handiwork. You are God's artwork. You are God's poem. That's totally cool. At least to me. Maybe you're like, oh man, this guy's lost it, dude. Man, what happened this morning? You've got to get some better breakfast. I don't know. Anyway, no, I just think that's so totally cool. You are a work of art. And with our emotions, I think what happens is sometimes different things can happen in our lives. And each of us have got a different story. Each of us have been different places at times, haven't we? We've experienced different things. Maybe moments that were harder to deal with, moments that were more passionate, more extreme, or maybe there were, we'll just do it this way. We'll have to wash the carpet later. Maybe there were times when there was a season in your life where that which was, causing grief and heartache just colored everything. Maybe. We are an artwork. And our emotions color our lives. Our emotions make our lives colorful. Don't you think? Don't you think that some of the different things you've experienced, good or bad, have colored your life? They're your stories. They're your experiences. We've all got regrets that, we've all got maybe a bit more color in one area that we think, oh man, I just really wish I didn't let that color sort of take over so much of my life at that time. But I can't change it because it is. It did happen. It was how things were. And sometimes, some of these things, of course, are because of our own doing, and other times it's maybe because of, just our circumstances. And, I don't know. This is going to be in the tape later on this week, so, if you want to get a photo now. But oops. the color and your ability to feel joy. Just think for a moment. Your ability to feel joy at something is because God gave you the ability to feel joy. You can experience something, and sometimes we experience it together. There's the World Cup coming up. Some of you are thinking, oh my gosh, not again. I had one 4 years ago. Anyway, it happens in November for some weird reason this year because we're playing in the Middle East. Yeah? World Cup final, December 18th. These are not in the notes, sorry. We get together, and there's going to be plenty, and you might be there, and there might be 1,000 fans in some stadium on the other side of the world, and you're sitting there with your cup of coffee or your pint of beer, and you're watching the game at home, and somebody scores, and you jump up and celebrate. You have the ability to have a joy that you can share with somebody else. You ever been at a concert, and you're just like, you share it, you can feel this collective experience? Or maybe someone that you love, something's gone really well for them, and something inside you says, oh, yes, I knew it. Way to go. I'm so glad that happened for you. It's like if we didn't have the emotion, all of a sudden we wouldn't be connected. We wouldn't feel things. And if we didn't have the ability to feel sadness, then we wouldn't have the ability to feel loss. And we wouldn't know how precious it is to have one another or to lose one another or to feel that something's not right. If we didn't have the ability to have passion, then maybe we wouldn't do anything in life. If we didn't have any ability to have some anger at times, something to rise up and say, this is so wrong. I cannot believe the way these people have been treated. This is wrong. We must do something about it. If we had no passion about us, then nothing would happen. Maybe you wouldn't have the kick up the backside to go for that new job or to change your circumstances. If you were just a blank white piece of paper, we wouldn't have any color in your life. And I think God was so involved. God was so at work in creating this poem, this masterpiece. He knew, I do not want you to be a blank white piece of paper. I would rather you be full of color. So much so that it could cause problems. I'd rather that than you be a blank piece of white paper, a monotonous robot with the inability to think or feel or experience for yourselves. See, of the two choices, the artist says, I never want just a white, blank canvas. It must be filled. This is what the artist, our Creator, does for us in humanity. And some of us are so wired so differently. You're looking at this and you're thinking, man, I've got a lot more blue, I've got a lot more red, or I don't have any of that green stuff. We're all so different because all of our experiences have been different. All of our journeys are different, and we all experience things that we wired differently. But we need to know that this reflects the artist who made us. Your emotions are a divine gift. They're a divine gift. And we learn in the life of Jesus that he had this whole spectrum of emotions, but somehow he learned to not let the emotions dictate and determine his every step, but he still had them. And so for the challenge is us, our emotions should color our lives, not control our lives. That's the issue. There's nothing wrong with your emotions. In fact, your emotions are divine. I think to myself, maybe you can't even say anymore. I don't even think you're too emotional is even valid. It's not even a valid argument to say you're too emotional. No, I'm so glad you're emotional. You should be emotional. The issue is not that you're emotional, the issue is what you do with your emotions. Right? The issue is not that I feel sad, it's what I do with my sadness. The issue is not that I feel angry, it's what I do with my anger. You see, that's the point. It's not that you're too emotional. You can't be too emotional. What somebody really means is, actually, don't let that emotion take over your life. Really, you know. And I think they reveal that we are made for community. You know, you can see all of a sudden, without the emotions, we wouldn't feel for one another, we wouldn't love one another, we wouldn't care for one another. Without those emotions, it just wouldn't happen. You're made for community because at the very beginning we discover, let us make man in our image. And we cannot separate the two. We cannot separate emotions from humankind. It's a divine gift. It's a divine gift. It's okay to have emotions. You were made this way on purpose. I hope you can find that hopefully this series will be helpful, practically helpful. You know, you're made this way on purpose. We are all unique works of art. And as we go forward in the next couple of weeks, we're going to look into specific emotions. We'll be looking at anger. We'll be looking at sadness. We'll be looking at envy. And we'll be looking at fear. So over the next few weeks, we'll specifically look, and today I had the opportunity to just kind of open up a general thing. And I know that you can't control how you feel. And although sometimes we wish people could, if you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, don't we wish we could control how that child feels? And the challenge for me as a parent, you might not be a parent, that's okay. I understand that this might not apply to you. But the challenge as a parent is not getting people to control how they feel. Actually, we need to help them learn how to manage what they feel. Because it's good that they feel things. Really good. And if you've got teenagers in your house, like I have 3, it's going to get really fun. And this is what science tells us, and we looked at it earlier in the year, that the way the teenage brain develops, you move your responses to the front of the brain, and you're more rational at the front of the brain. And a teenager's brain goes through the same process it went when it was like a 2-year-old. And so, of course, everything is huge and can be irrational and can be, because they're just growing and learning. It's the way they're made. And it's not easy. And if you're in that stage, we'd love to walk with you, journey with you. We're in the same boat, so I don't know if I can help other than say, cry on my shoulder while I cry on yours. But anyway, it's tough. But learning that our brains work that way. So if you're a teenager and you're in the room today, I'm so glad that you're able to be here. But I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. And things might seem differently because as your brain begins to rework and rewire, you begin to think differently and respond differently. And that's totally, totally okay because that's how the artist has made you to function. Totally okay. And there's nothing wrong with you. And in a few years' time, it'll settle down. That's okay. You can't rush it, but let me tell you this, it will happen. So there's nothing wrong with you. Nothing wrong at all. It's just the stage that you're in. And then when you get really old like me, you'll just forget things. So anyway, no, just kidding. So we want to help you find out ways that emotions should color our lives rather than control our lives. And more than anything, I want to see you thrive. I want to see all of us be like full color people. I want to see us thrive in life. That's my heart for you, whether you member of this church, follower of Jesus or not. No. As a human to human, I want to see you thrive. I want to see you living a full life. That's my heart for you. And I don't want your life to be thrown into chaos whenever a situation occurs, whenever something happens. I don't want to, you might walk away from this today and you might never decide to become a follower of Jesus, to put your trust in Jesus. And I understand that, but more than anything, I want you to not be driven or controlled by fear. I want you not to be controlled by rage and anger. I want you not to be controlled by the heavy weight of sadness that crushes you, or to be so driven by envy. More than anything, I want to see you free. I want to see you thrive. And I'm going to just propose a little thing that you could try, something that we could do, and try to make this practical and helpful. Because more than anything, I don't want to see you controlled by your emotions. And so just going to give a few steps that could help, hopefully, take some things back. If you've got a phone, take a picture of it, write it down. Release, refocus on something else. Recognize that God's involved, and respond. Do something. So 4 little steps as we begin to recognize that it's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to punch him in the face. It's okay to feel really sad, but it doesn't mean life is worth ending. It's okay to feel really unsure, but it doesn't mean I'm going to live in uncertainty forever. Don't let it control where we are. So release, refocus, recognize, and respond. And we're going to break it down. There's a verse, it's in Romans. And this guy, Paul, once again, Paul, wow, good. Wow. So Paul wrote this letter to the people in Rome. And he says this, it's in Romans 12. And it says, with God helping you, take your everyday, your ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're working, you're walking. You take your ordinary everyday life, going to work, and place it before God as an offering. That's the release. Okay, your everyday, ordinary life. I could be in the office, I could be working on the computer, I could be cleaning something, I could be sitting in the back garden, I could be whatever you're doing, your everyday, ordinary life. Release. Release. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You don't have to be something spectacular. He's not saying do something amazing, do something wonderful, do something good. Your everyday, ordinary life, and place it before God. He's not asking you to perform. He's not asking you to be some super duper Christian that's doing some super duper thing. He's saying your everyday, ordinary, you're eating, you're sleeping, you're waking, you're building, you're cooking, you're washing, you're dropping kids off at school, you're answering emails, your everyday, ordinary life, and release it. Take that. Take the everyday, ordinary, and say, this is my offering. This is my offering. And then the next step is to begin to refocus. And Paul carries on. He says, don't become so well adjusted or influenced by the culture around you. Don't become so controlled by the culture around you that you begin to fit in without even thinking for yourself. Instead, fix your attention on God, and you'll be changed from the inside out. So instead of the external stimuli, the external culture, the external people telling you how you should or what you should do, and this is what you should do to find happiness, and this is what you should do for this, and this is what you should do for that, instead of culture telling you or driving you or determining what you do, Paul's just saying, no. There's another way to go about it. And the change doesn't come from the outside in, the change comes from the inside out. And in the midst of everything that's going on, I look up. I refocus my attention on God. I refocus on God. And then the next step, Paul carries on, is recognize and respond. And he says, recognize what God wants from you and respond quickly. Recognize what's going on, learn what's going on, and then respond quickly. Unlike the culture around you, which just desires to drag you down. God wants to bring out the best in you. You are his poem. You are his work of art. You are his piece de resistance. You are the masterpiece. You are his opus, right? You are his work of art. He wants to bring out the best in you. Paul's saying, get involved with what God wants to do in your life because his heart is for you. He wants to bring out the best in you. Culture wants to drag you down to their level. He wants to lift you up to bring out the best in you. So we release, it's like surrendering. We refocus on something else. We recognize and respond. And just, so what does that look like? Okay, what would that look like for these 4 sort of steps? How do we put it into practice? So let's just say this. If you think about like, okay, I feel so angry right now. I am so wound up. I cannot believe that they would do this or that this happened in the workplace or whatever. I cannot believe it. And I take my everyday, my ordinary moment. I feel so angry right now. Man, well, I can't bring you an offering other than my everyday, ordinary moment, God. And right now, I am feeling really, really narked off. I give you that. You want an offering? Fine. I'm so angry right now. I'm giving it to you. I'm so upset right now. And you begin to refocus on something else. Man, you know, I feel so angry because I feel overlooked. I feel so angry because I feel misjudged. I feel so angry because I feel misunderstood. I feel so angry because I'm alone and somebody should be here with me. I feel, refocus. Figure out what's going on. Begin to focus on God and let that be your prayer. Man. And it could be a very valid reason, a legitimate reason. I feel so angry right now because my boss has totally taken advantage of me. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's wrong. You can be angry about real things. We should be angry about stuff, you guys. Refocus onto God. And then recognize that God is not an absent person, but he is a creator who's involved in every bit of our lives. And we say, wow, please be involved. Please be involved. Help me out right now because I'm feeling so angry. I don't know how to handle what I'm dealing with. I don't know how to process what I'm working through. Help me. Help me. And then respond. You might do something different. You might think, oh, I never thought of that. Or maybe we're so heavy with grief and we feel so sad because something has gone on in our life and we feel so heavy and we're like, oh, man, how can I sing a song of praise? How can I stand here and clap my hands and be like, oh, lovely Jesus, you're so wonderful and so good. Actually, where in the world were you? Because my world fell apart. I just want to go back to bed. I want to stay in my room, turn all the lights out, pull the duvet over my head, and I want to stay here forever. I don't want to do anything else. That is your offering. That is your everyday, your waking, your breathing, your eating, sleeping, going around life moment. I'm having a really tough time, God. I can't do some super duper applause. I can just say, have my brokenness. And as we begin to release that as our offering, we don't have to perform. You just release, you just give it. You're not being asked to perform. You're not being asked to dance or sing a song or light a candle. You're not being asked to do anything. God just says, just release your everyday moment to me. That's your offering. That's your act of worship. And in my deepest despair, I say my tears are my praise. Because that's all I can offer right now. That's all I've got in the tank to give. And I give you my sadness, my grief, my anguish. I give you my heartbreak. You don't ask for perfection, you just ask for my everyday, ordinary life. And so I refocus on you. And all of a sudden, instead of that crushing depression, that crushing anxiety, that crushing grief, controlling everything about your life and making you feel like you're just on your own and nobody understands, all of a sudden, the creator of the world, the artist of all artists, is there in your grief. Because you said, sit with me, weep with me, be with me. That's your offering. And that means you get to refocus your attention. You begin to recognize what's going on because you can say to God, I am so heartbroken because I do feel all alone. I don't know what's happening in life. I feel so anxious about so many things. You just tell him exactly what it is. So-and-so's not around anymore. So-and-so's, you give very valid reasons that you're experiencing this sadness. Remember, you're supposed to be emotional. There's nothing wrong with being emotional. We just don't let the emotions control our lives. And we refocus, we recognize what's going on, and then you respond. We do something different. God might show you how to do something different. You might just be like, you know what? I was going to stay in bed all day, but you know what, today? I'm just going to go downstairs. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's all you need to do for that day. Just go downstairs. Just get out of the dark room. I don't know what it'll be. Maybe it'll be different for each of us, right? We're so angry, but then all of a sudden this idea drops into your mind like, oh yeah, just go for a walk. Go for a little walk outside. Take a few deep breaths. Do something. That's the response. So really practically, as we wrap up this morning, I know we've gone on quite a journey, and thank you for hanging on. We learn to release. We refocus on something else. We recognize that God is involved. He's not absent. God is involved in whatever we're experiencing. He's there with us. And then we do something with it. We do something about it. God, I pray for you. We pray together as we wrap up. God, thank you so much that you are so creative and so imaginative, that you paint our lives with the colorful emotions. God, thank you so much that you've made us that way. I hope that we all have just a better understanding about how you've made our lives. Thank you so much. And thank you. It reminds us that not only are we human, but we are actually divine like you, that you've given us something that's a divine gift to feel and respond and be like you. Thank you so much. And Father, I just pray for everyone here today who maybe might have spent a bit of time feeling like their emotions were worthless or not worth having, or that there was something wrong with them. I just ask that you would just help them see things differently. And for any of us who are still struggling with the times when just emotions seem to take the wheel and control what we do, I just ask that you would help us learn to stop letting emotions control our lives, and rather that they would color our lives. God, thank you for everyone here, that your heart is to bring out the best in each one of us. Your heart is to see us thrive. Wow, thank you. You're not against us. You're not angry at us. You want to see us thrive in life. In your wonderful name we pray. Amen.